If you have ever thought, why do I even need to study Organon? Then do not skip this lecture. After all, knowledge tells you what to do. Organon and philosophy tells you what not to do. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Organon classroom with Dr. Gazala. Here we are with episode 2 of our Hughes series. Today we will cover lecture 2 and 3, the Organon from the book of Hughes. In this chapter, Hughes has given us an excellent compilation of Hahnemann's work, which includes the explanation and defense of his therapeutic method, that is, homeopathy. Right? Lecture 1, we discussed how scientific Hughes was and his viewpoint of seeing things scientifically, right, and asking for reasons. This continues in the second and the third chapter as well. As and when we proceed, we will get to know number of years, okay, starting from one single edition to the final sixth edition that you refer to presently. The journey of Organon, the teachings of Organon, and what we have to expect in our following lectures when we are dealing with Hughes here. Let's start with the lecture for today. Now we'll start with the journey of the editions of Organon during Hahnemann's lifetime. Okay, and the major change that has been made into that. 1810 से लेके 1833 में क्या चेंजेस हुए हैं इज व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू स्टार्ट विद. ओके, जो अभी आप रेफर करते हो सिक्स्थ एडिशन ऑफ ऑर्गेनॉन, वो तो हैनमैन की डेथ के बाद पब्लिश हुआ हुआ है, राइट, एंड इट वाज इन 1842. ओके, तो 1810 टू 1833 में क्या चेंजेस हुए हैं which was made by Hahnemann himself is what we are going to start our lecture with. So in first edition published in 1810, the book was called Organon of the Rational Medical Science. Okay, अभी पहले सुनने में तो सही लगता है, राइट, बिकॉज रैशनल है, सो रैशनल है मतलब you're asking reason for it, scientific reasoning, logical reasoning. Okay, but as Hahnemann continued his clinical practice, he realized that the word rational had become associated with other speculative medical theories of his time. Medicine was becoming full of assumptions and hypotheses rather than careful observation. Okay, इसीलिए that crossover rational comes in, and then he published the fifth edition in 1833. He deliberately removed the word rational, and the title of the book became The Organon of the Healing Art. Now this wasn't just a cosmetic change कि नहीं सिर्फ बुक का ये ऐसे चेंज कर दो, but it was a philosophical statement. अभी जब हमने अपना स्पेशल टॉपिक किया था क्यूरेंटर वर्सेस क्यूरेंटर, उसमें भी इट वाज अ फिलोसॉफिकल शिफ्ट, इट वाज जस्ट नॉट एन अल्फाबेट शिफ्ट. ठीक है, तो जब फिलोसफीज बदलती है ना गाइस, तब माइंडसेट बदलता है. इसीलिए इम्पोर्टेंट है कि आप उस फिलोसफी के रूट को समझो कि क्यों हुआ है वो. only then it will make sense to you when you are going to start practicing organon in your life. Okay, तो Hahnemann जो था, he didn't wanted medicine to be judged by only clever theories or hypothetical theories and all of it, but by its ability to heal the patients. So in other words, healing came before theorizing. Okay, that is why by elimination of the rational implies refusal to subject doctrines to speculative theory wala jo statement hai, came in because Hahnemann believed and Hahnemann rejected the speculative doctrines. He believed that the medicine should be based on careful observation, experience, experimentation and clinical results and not just imagination. इसीलिए आता है enter order sapere, which means dare to be wise. This was Hahnemann's message to every physician, to not accept old beliefs simply because they have been followed for centuries. It was to question them, it was to observe for your own self and then think independently about it. Now we have to have the courage to follow the truth, even if it goes against the tradition. That is what Hahnemann meant to say when he introduced Orde Sapere. Okay, and now in this one sentence is the spirit of Organon, which is not blind acceptance but courageous evidence based thinking. Evidence based thinking रहेगा तभी तो आपको evidence based results आएंगे, right? Evidence based results आएंगे तभी तो आपका documentation होगा. जब आपका डॉक्यूमेंटेशन होगा तभी तो आपका यूनिवर्सल एक्सेप्टेंस होगा, right? So starting up from this simple two words, tell your acceptance universally, globally, at any and every stage. That all depends on this philosophical shift. That is why studying philosophy becomes important. Now that we understand why Hahnemann changed the title of his masterpiece and what Odyssey truly means, let's move to the next concept where he begins defining the true purpose of medicine. The physician's high and only mission is to restore the sick to health, to cure as its term. Something very basic that Hahnemann has told over the years, and this has remained constant. This forms the basis of our practice as a fraternity, right, guys? Here, the goal is simple, but it is profound and it is substantial, and that is what it is to cure the patient. That's why Hahnemann says that we see the physician as a craftsman, okay? Craftsman who, someone who is practicing the art of healing with skill, observation, and experience. Like a skilled artisan, every decision is based on what actually helps the patient. ठीक है, कैलकुलेटेड रिस्क होते हैं, कैलकुलेटेड डिसीजंस होते हैं, उसी बेसिस पे हमारे कैलकुलेटेड डोजेजेस होते हैं, एंड देन दैट इज व्हाट मेक्स द डिफरेंस, राइट? That is why Hughes says that Hahnemann has rejected over here a physician who gets lost in speculation, assumptions, and imaginary hypothetical theories. कि ऐसा होगा तो वैसा होगा, वैसा होगा तो ऐसा होगा, ऐसा होगा तो जैसा होगा. No ऐसा वैसा तैसा when it is coming to Hahnemann. ठीक है, such ideas may sound intellectual, they're good music to the ears, but if they don't restore the health, they don't get the patient back to his healthy state, do they really have any value in clinical practice, guys? So the first lesson of Organon is clear that the patient comes first, theories come later. The true measure of physician is not how much he knows, but how effectively he restores the sick to health, to cure as its term. Had I been your examiner, I would have taken you up only on this as it is termed, because we've been trained that ways, and I'm very grateful to the teachers that have ever taught me, and it's been a wonderful experience with them, and how much ever I try to deliver to you the best that I can is all because I have been taught well by my teachers, and I thank them all. Okay, okay, this was a little offbeat, but it was important to tell you all. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Now let's understand one of the most fundamental concepts of the organon. According to Hahnemann, the real disease is internal, right? It's a dynamic derangement, the internal derangement of the vital force, right? And it is an essential alteration. We cannot see this disturbance directly because it has got no shape, color, or size. Dynamic है, वो invisible है, कैसे दिखेगा? So how do we know that it exists? We know it through what it produces, that is the symptoms. The symptoms are the outward reflection of the inner disturbance, just like a mirror reflects an object. Therefore, for all practical purposes, the totality of symptoms is what constitutes the disease picture. ठीक है, इसीलिए हम उसको बोलते हैं आउटवर्डली रिफ्लेक्टेड पिक्चर ऑफ द इंटरनली deranged vital force. It's the portrait of disease. This is why Hahnemann advises us not to rely only on the morbid anatomy or pathological changes. ठीक है, सब्जेक्टिव एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव सिम्टम्स सिम्टोमेटोलॉजी में हम पढ़ते हैं, राइट? सब्जेक्टिव इज व्हाट द पेशेंट फील्स, ऑब्जेक्टिव इज व्हाट आर द विजिबल साइंस, है ना? तो हैनेमैन क्या कहता है कि हमें सिर्फ ये साइंस नहीं देखनी है. पैथोलॉजी में टेल अस व्हाट हैज हैपेंड टू द टिश्यूज, बट इट डज नॉट रिवील द कंप्लीट इंडिविजुअलिटी ऑफ द पेशेंट. The physician must treat the patient based on the totality of symptoms, because that is the only visible expression of that invisible disease. So remember this: the disease is invisible, but its language, which is the symptoms, this is what every homeopathic physician must learn to read and understand. ठीक है? Next comes the ground plan of Organon. Aphorism number 3, guys. Aphorism number 3. Number one, the knowledge of disease. Number two, the knowledge of medicine. Number three, what is curative in that medicine and the therapeutics of it. Right? So, step one is knowledge of the morbid state, which supplies the indication. Step two is knowledge of the medicinal powers, which gives the instrument. And step three, the knowledge of how to choose and administer the remedy, which is the thing indicated. This slide explains one of the most important principles in the history of medicine. Before Hahnemann discovered the law of similars, he observed that a medicine has the power to produce an artificial or alien morbid state, right, in a healthy individual. This is what we learn through the drug provings. Now, we have patients with natural diseases, the sufferings and the symptoms experienced by them. On the right, as you see, is the artificial disease produced by the medicine. If this artificial disease is dissimilar to the patient's disease, as shown here, it cannot remove the natural disease. Instead, the patient may simply experience another disturbance without achieving a cure. Therefore, Hahnemann concluded that dissimilar diseases cannot cure one another. ठीक है, cure is possible only when the medicinal disease has the right relationship with the natural disease, जो हम बोलते हैं similar remedy, right, single similar remedy. तो उसी की बात यहाँ हो रही है, and the concept then ultimately leads us to the law of similia similibus curantur. So, this slide is preparing us to understand why medicines that produce similar symptoms are capable of curing, while those producing dissimilar symptoms are not. Now, this slide shows you the major differences between homeopathic, allopathic, and antipathic या palliative method of treatments as given in Organon. ठीक है, symptom relation, efficacy, and outcome के basis पे we see these therapeutic measures with regards to how similar are the symptoms, how dissimilar are the symptoms, and how opposite are the symptoms. ठीक है, तो efficacy किस हिसाब से और किस लेवल पे होगी, transient होगी, permanent होगी, temporary होगी, that is what is seen on this slide, as well as the outcome as we see. Permanently extinguished मतलब complete cure होता है in homeopathic. In modern medicine, as you see, the disease remains unannihilated. ठीक है, temporary elevation होगा. And antipathic या palliative is, there is amelioration, but it is followed up by aggravation. Now, this slide explains antipathic or palliative method, ठीक है, and why it does not produce a lasting cure. अभी यहाँ पे ना प्राइमरी एक्शन एंड सेकेंडरी एक्शन, प्राइमरी एक्शन ऑफ द मेडिसिन, सेकेंडरी एक्शन ऑफ द वाइटल फोर्स, ये याद रखना है. ठीक है, और इसका बेस्ट एग्जांपल दैट हैनेमैन has given and Hughes has included as well is that of opium. When you give that for sleeplessness, तो प्राइमरी एक्शन की वजह से पेशेंट इज गोइंग टू फील बेटर, बेटर मीनिंग here he is going to feel sleepy, but for a short period of time. But when that medicinal dosage weans off, okay, it is finished, then comes the secondary action of the vital force, which is what, it is going to bring the original symptom back, but now with greater intensity. तो पहले अगर sleeplessness level 1 पे थी, अब after taking an antipathic mode of treatment, the sleeplessness is going to be thrice, 4 or 5 times the original intensity. ठीक है, it's going to be worse than before. So, to control the symptoms again, a larger dose is required, and this creates a vicious cycle of temporary relief followed by aggravation. So, Hahnemann therefore concluded that the antipathic method only suppresses symptoms, it does not cure it. The lesson here is simple: temporary relief is not true cure. A genuine cure must be lasting and not just for the moment. ठीक है, इसीलिए देखो ये जो सारे ड्रग्स होते हैं, ओपॉइड्स वगैरह हो गए, एंड ऑल ऑफ दीज, जो सारे रिलैक्सेंट्स एंड एवरीथिंग, रेस्टिल वगैरह जैसे, यू नो, नाम से यू गेट मेडिसिन एंड ऑल विच इज गिवन फॉर इंसोम्निया एंड ऑल ऑफ इट. तो ये सारी मेडिसिन एडिक्टिव होती है. द पेशेंट स्टार्ट्स टेकिंग इट, द पेशेंट कैन नॉट sleep without taking it. ये one of the common complaints you get in your OPD when the patient comes through. ठीक है, तो उसको ध्यान से सुनना है और समझना है कि यहाँ पे एंटीपैथिक मोड ऑफ ट्रीटमेंट यूज किया गया है, इसीलिए जो उनका रिलीफ है वो टेम्परेरी रहा है. ओके. Now enter vital force, aphorism number 9, guys. Now let's understand how this becomes the central concepts of Organon. Okay? Hahnemann calls it Lebenskraft. Okay, it's a German word where Leben means life, Kraft means force or power. So Lebenskraft literally means the life force. According to Hahnemann, this vital force is dynamic, invisible, and intangible. It cannot be seen under a microscope or measured in a laboratory. Yet, it animates, coordinates, and preserves the body throughout life. He uses the word dynamic to indicate that the true origin of the disease lies in this invisible sphere, not merely in the tissues and organs. जो tissues and organs और pathological changes होते हैं वो होता है outcome of the disease. Okay, that's the byproduct of the disease and not the disease itself. This concept is completely different from the pure mechanical or the chemical view of medicine. In homeopathy, the physician aims to restore this deranged or the disturbed Lebenskraft. Okay, Lebenskraft क्या था? Life force. Okay, to harmony, because when the vital force is balanced, health is naturally restored. This slide introduces one of Hahnemann's most important concepts, the chronic miasms, especially SORA, which he called the mother of chronic diseases. हम जो अब सिक्स एडिशन पढ़ते हैं उसमें जो है एफोरिज्म नंबर 78 is where Hahnemann explains that the true natural chronic diseases arise from chronic miasms and that SORA is the oldest, most universal and most fundamental of them. ठीक है, ये जो एक डायग्राम है, this and the iceberg kind of the diagram that we had covered in our chronic miasms by Allen, ये एकदम ingrain कर लेना है हमें. ठीक है, once you start recognizing the diagram as it is, you will know how these miasms present themselves. Okay, nothing is coming haywire from here, there, and everywhere. Okay, they've got one common root, and that happens to be Sora, as given by Hahnemann. Okay, you will notice a French term over here, and that's called as diathis herpetic. Okay, now here diathis means a constitutional predisposition or a tendency, and herpetic means the itch or the herpetic eruption. So this word literally transforms or literally translates to the constitutional tendency arising from the itch miasm. And which is the itch miasm? Sora. So Hahnemann used this expression to indicate Sora as an underlying constitutional state from which numerous chronic diseases develop. That is why he famously wrote, the 7/8 of chronic diseases originate from Sora. Think of Sora as the root of the tree over here, while conditions, like asthma, phthisis, hypochondriasis, and hysteria and all of it, they're merely its branches. So, to achieve a true and lasting cure, homeopathy aims to treat the root and not just the branches. इससे समझ में आया, हम जो बोलते हैं ना होम्योपैथी जड़ से इलाज करती, सो दिस जड़, वी आर ट्रीटिंग द जड़, वी आर ट्रीटिंग द सोरा ओवर हियर. ऑलराइट, here comes in potentization, aphorism 269 to 70. Hahnemann describes how the latent medicinal power of a drug is developed through the processes of trituration and succussion, right? The mechanical labor. As the material quantity of the drug decreases, the dynamic of the material, the medicinal power increases. And this is why the arrow, see, you can see it is moving in from the physical to the dynamic axis. So you've got x axis and y axis, physical and dynamic. So physical से dynamic level का medicine और curative action कैसे improve होगा या increase होगा, is what Hahnemann tells us in 269 and 270. Hahnemann believed that potentization transforms medicine into a form capable of acting on the dynamic vital force where disease actually exists. So we remember that potentization is not merely making a medicine weaker, it is the process of reducing the material while enhancing its dynamic healing power. Aphorism 155 to 160 is what you are seeing on your screen right now. It's about the dose, the size of the dose, okay, how you are going to select a simple dose, and how that is going to be, it is going to be something which will give in the curative power of the drug and not something that is going to harm that person. ठीक है, तो aggravation नहीं होते हुए the smallest possible dose is what is required to stimulate the diseased vital force. Okay, so a medicine, even though it may be homeopathically suited to the cure of a disease, does harm in every dose that is too large. The more harm, the larger the dose, the higher the potency selected. ठीक है, इसका मतलब क्या है कि even if you are filling up that patient with multiple and repeated doses and not given in the proper potency that is meant for the case, which obviously then depends upon the susceptibility, the pathology of the disease and all of that together, उसके basis पे नहीं देते हुए you are just prescribing something here, there and everywhere, the patient is going to deteriorate. There is not going to be any recovery nor cure. ठीक है, तो here Hahnemann is advising us that the precise remedy demands the smallest possible material bulk to avoid destructive aggravation. Okay, this being the second half of the organon is highly practical. Here Hahnemann explains how to apply the homeopathic principles that we've learned in the first half in different clinical situations. Okay, so over here we are highlighting four important areas that Hahnemann says about our practice. Okay, so the first one being treatment of local diseases, aphorism 185 to 203, where Hahnemann teaches that local diseases should not be treated as isolated lesions but as manifestations of the disease, okay, and to see the patient as a whole. Secondly, mental disorders, aphorisms 210 to 230, Hahnemann emphasizes that mental and emotional symptoms are of the highest importance in selecting the remedy. Intermittent fevers, as explained in aphorism 231 to 44, where he provides the homeopathic approach to periodic diseases such as malarial fevers. And finally, diet and regimen part, aphorisms 259 to 263, where Hahnemann explains that proper diet, lifestyle, and removal of maintaining causes are essential for a successful cure. So, together, these sections transform the Organon from a book of philosophy into a practical guide for everyday homeopathic practice, right? The title Organon was not chosen by chance. Hahnemann was inspired by the work of Francis Bacon, and that was Novum Organum. ठीक है, ये याद रखना है, because the word organon means an instrument or a tool. Bacon's book was a tool for discovering scientific knowledge, while Hahnemann's organon became a tool for the physician to cure patients. The quote by Richard Hughes beautifully compares the two. He says that Hahnemann's method is not about creating endless theories or speculation. Instead, it's about practical healing. That is why he calls it as the grave of speculative science. In other words, theories alone are buried here, and what remains is a method that actually helps patients and it survives. So the correlation is simple, and it is that Bacon taught us how to discover knowledge, whereas Hahnemann taught us how to apply the knowledge to cure the sick. That is why Organon is the foundation of homeopathic practice, and that is why you guys need to know it well so that you practice it out well. This final slide over here highlights the important thought from Richard Hughes. He says that Hahnemann had already given his Prodromus anticipationis regarding diseases and its cure. Here, Prodromus refers to something that is prodromal, the beginning or the early signs of a disease, as we call it to be, and anticipatinus means anticipations or predictions. In simple words, Hughes means that Hahnemann had already laid down the basic principle of homeopathy, but he also reminds us that Hahnemann did not consider his work to be complete. He believed that his method would become more complete and more refined with continued observation and clinical expertise. This teaches us an important lesson. Homeopathy is not based on blind belief, it is part of a practical healing art that grows through careful observation and experiences and continuous improvement. As Hughes beautifully concludes over here, guys, the method remains an art, continually refined by practice. That is why Organon remains a living guide for every homeopathic physician even today. With this, we end our lecture here, and I hope you guys have understood this well. And if you connect to the topics that are taught, and if you feel relatable, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, The Organon Classroom with Dr. Gazala, and follow us on Instagram as well. Our handouts are available there too for you to see. And yes, coming up next would be lecture 4, Knowledge of Diseases, from Richard Hughes. Happy learning to all of you. Learn well, earn well, have fun. Thank you so much.